Hello, learners. My name is CPA Ringo Frederick, and today's session I want us to look at financial management. And the concept that I want us to handle today, of course, it is a very key concept relating to what we know as WMCC, the weighted marginal cost of capital, WMCC. And we'll be looking at a question that was tested in April 2025. That's the question that we'll be looking at. There's that question that was tested in April 2025, and that was question number 1, part B. Because I'd already given you the concept earlier on of WMCC, so I just want us to go straight to the question and see what you're asked to do in relation to this case. So looking at this case, you're told that Pivot Limited is considering raising an additional 20 million to finance an expansion program. The firm's existing capital structure, which is considered to be optimal, is as follows. We have ordinary share capital, we have reserves, we have 16% debentures, 1,000 per value, 14% preference shares capital, 20 shillings per value. Additional info, these are all that we are given in that context, my good students, which you can see at this point. Then we are told that, of course, required the cost of retained earnings, cost of new ordinary share capital, cost of new 16% debentures, cost of new preference shares. Then the good examiner wants us to determine the company's weighted marginal cost of capital, which is WMCC. So in this context, one thing that I want us to just have a recall on, if at all you check our videos, what we've been doing all through, anytime you are handling the component of WMCC, one thing that will be very clear and which you can also distinguish it with the concept of WCC is that on WMCC, whenever I want to determine the weights, because all you are looking at is simply the cost of raising additional funds to finance what? New projects. See, this is a cost of raising additional funds. See, these are additional funds. And what are we looking at? We're looking at to finance new projects. To finance new projects. That's a key element that we need to grasp here. That we need to raise these funds to finance these aspects of new projects. The concept of what? Marginal. That is additional. So difference with WMCC is that on WMCC, I'll be focusing on aspect of considering these weights. The weights will be determined on the marginal values that will be raised compared to WCC, where we were considering the aspect of weights being determined on the market value. For WMCC, I will talk of what we need to raise, additional funds that we'll be raising. That will be important, okay? So, looking at our question, identify the optimal capital structure first of all, even before we consider our costs. Even before considering our cost, let us analyze the optimal structure of the company. The optimal structure of the company, these are the details that we're given, and straight away we can see what you are given there from ordinary share capital, reserves, debentures, as well as preference share capital. So that is what you need to have, yeah? So then, this is what you should be having. We have our structure. According to our optimal structure, we have ordinary shares. The ordinary shares, you are given a value of 100. We have our reserves, these are retained earnings. Reserves, you are given a value of 50 million. We have 16% debentures. So we have debentures here. And debentures, you're given a value of 62.5. We also have preference shares. So preference shares, we're given a value of that 7,500, so that the total we have 250,000. So this is our optimal capital structure that we were given in this context. What do we need to raise? Additional amount that we need to raise is what? Additional amount that we need to raise, we are given a value of 20 million. Okay? So at this point, I want us to understand this concept that Mwalimu wants to share with us right now. At any given point in time, whenever we are considering the concept of WMCC, is that of the optimal capital structure, each and every source that we have here should give us proportionately to what we have in our optimal structure, because this is what we need to raise. So you'll find that number one, all these other elements, we can raise it from where? From issuing the securities. The only item that we cannot issue is reserves, which is retained earnings. Because these are internal, we cannot issue to the public for us to raise more funds. So, and that's why many a times in most of the questions you'll always be told that the maximum amount that can be raised from retained earnings, it is a specific value that will always be given. That is to say, like for example in our case, here, which we can also prove it, look at our case, note number one. Note number one in our question, we are told the farmer expects to generate 4 million from retained earnings for this expansion program. So, of the total value that we are having, I expected to generate 4 million from reserves. How have they determined that 4 million? This is how we'll always determine that. So we are given directly, but Mwalimu wants to show us how did they come about the 4 million. So let us look at our fraction or proportion of our current optimal structure. Ordinary shares, of course, I'll be having, this is the same as to say, I'm talking about 10 of 25 divide by 25, simply 100 divided by 250, then you of course reduce it to the value 10 of 25. In this other case, you're having of course 5 of what? 25. We have the other value, which in this case you can consider 6.25, or if at all this probably to make it much easier so that you should be like Mwalimu, why are we taking these values? You see, we're having 100, right? So take 100 here of 250. We have 50. You take 50 of 250. We have 62.5. 62.5 of 250. We have 37.5. Take 37.5 of 250. So that as of the end of the day, what do we need to raise? We need to raise the 20 million. So each proportion will give us how much? Times 20 million, times 20 million, times 20 million, times 20 million. So this is what we are expected to have. So the good examiner is telling us clearly here that, you know what, regardless of whatever that is happening, the maximum that you can raise here is 4 million. So you're given the option to determine the balances. With the balances, you'll find that the 4 million would be how they have determined that is 50 of 250 times the 20 million, which is giving us what? The 4 million. You see? So that is what will always be given. Or if at all you're not given, just know that this is a maximum that you can raise. Because out of the 20 million that you need to take, I'll have the component of ordinary shares, I'll have the component of debentures, I'll have the component of preference shares, and I'll be having the component of retained earnings, which are reserves. So already you're given reserves 4 million, maximum that you can raise. So these other three, we can literally do what? Issue and get it from our public. See? So that is one thing. that we need to always consider when, of course, doing this case. So what will we be having here? I'm having 100 of 250 times 20,000, which will give us a value of what? 8,000. So we take 8,000, 62.5 of 250 times 20,000. That will give us, of course, a value of 5,000. And finally, 37.5 of 250 times 20, this will give us 3,000, see? So from each source, yeah, from each source, then this is what I should be having. Like 8,000 plus 4,000 plus 5,000 plus 3,000, giving us the value of 20. So for Wmcc, my good students, determining the weights, I'll be using the marginals. I'll be using the additional funds. That is very key concept that you need to understand. But again, I know very well that for us to determine that the combined cost of raising these additional funds, allowed to compute what? Our component costs. We'll have to compute our component costs. So what will be our component costs? Component cost, of course, we start with the first element given in our case, which was what? Ordinary shares and retained earnings. These are the components that we need to compute. So we're told that additional new ordinary shares will be issued at 90 each, subject to a flotation cost of 10 per share. So in that context, clearly, I know very well that at all times, whenever we are required to compute our cost of equity, I'll have two components. For ordinary shares, I'll always consider the O of 1 plus G of what? PO minus any flotation cost or any form of what? Any form of discount. That is what we know we should always tend to have. So that is to say, in this context, we take our DO, the dividends that we've just paid. The most recent dividends paid by the company is 4 per share. So we take 4 into 1 plus growth rate. According to a good examiner, what was the growth rate given? The growth rate given, we check the same note. The firm's dividends are expected to grow at the rate of 5% per annum in perpetuity. So we take 5%, 0.05. All of these we are going to divide by the PO, which were given in note 2. They were going at 90, but there was a flotation cost of how much? 10 shillings. So we solve for that. That will give us what? The first component of what? Our ordinary shares. See? The other part we solve for cost of equity, but this time round we want retained earnings. Because retained earnings we are not issuing, then I'll be talking of our cost of equity retained earnings to be the O, 1 plus G. Only this time I consider PO without any flotation cost. So that as at the end of the day, I'll be having 4, 1 plus 0.05, all of this into what? 90, without any component of flotation cost. See? Because we are not issuing, that is purely internal. So that we agree, as at the end of the day, I should be talking of 4 times 0.05. In this case, remember, all idea, you have to consider what? Plus G. All of these cases, consider plus G. Okay? So we have all these cases, plus G, which is 0.05, plus G, which is what? 0.05. So that the first case, what will we be having? The first case I'll be having 4 times 4 times 1.05. We divide by 80 times 100 to give us 5.25% plus 5%, which will give us what? 10.25%. What about the cost of equity retained earnings? We get a value of 4 times 1.05 divided by 90 plus 0.05, which will give us a value of 9.67%. See? 9.67%. So we have determined, of course, the cost of equity, retained earnings, and the cost of ordinary shares. Recall, we must always consider what? Plus G. Plus G. So once we have that case, we consider the other form of, so we're done with the costs. So we go to the debentures. These are debt. KD. KD will always be considered after tax. KD will always be considered after tax. And you have to consider, if at all you are dealing with either the irredeemable or redeemable debts. Redeemable debts are those that have a maturity period. Irredeemable are those that don't have a maturity period. Like in our case, if at all you can check, the debt component which you are given in note number 3, the company will issue new 16% debentures at a price of 1100 with a flotation cost of 5 per debentures. So you don't have a maturity period on that. And that is to say, determining our case will be easy. Recall how to determine KD. We talk about interest of market value of our debt, 1 minus T, because you're looking at what? After tax cost of debt. The component of interest will always be determined on the par value. Like in our case, we have our component of interest, which will be 16% yes. Per value of these debentures, look at our optimal capital structure, we're given 1,000. Our market value, in the event that you're having any flotation or discount, needs to be deducted. Like, what did we have in this case? We had a component of flotation cost. The flotation cost that you're given by our good examiner, we were given a value of what? We were given a value that, in that case, market value, in note number 3, it was going at 1100, yes, but we had a flotation cost of 5 per debenture, so minus 5 times 1 minus T, 0.3. See? So that as at the end of the day, my good students, this will give us what? If I told you to work it out, what will we be having? 0.16 times 1,000, we divide by into 1100 here, minus 5 times 0.7, Mwalimu is getting a value of 10.22%. So you're having 10.22%. You can confirm on your end. The last component is KP, cost of preference shares. We talk about our dividends preference of PO minus any flotation or any discount that I might be having in this case. Dividends, again, recall, it will always be determined on the par value. That one will never change. It will always be determined on the par value. The Mwalimu had guided us before. And the par value are we given? We check. That will take our mind to point number, preference dividends. That is note 4. New 14% preference shares will be issued at 30 with a flotation cost of 2 per share. So similar concept, dividends being determined on the par value, where we having 14% yield. The par value, we are given a par value of what? We are given a par value of 20 per share. we are going to divide all this, of course, by our PO, market value of this preference shares. You're given 30 with less any flotation cost. In this case, you're given a value of 2. So then, in that case, that will give us how much? That will give us a value of what? We take then our calculator, we work it out. 0.14 times 20 divided by 30 minus 2, I'm getting a value of 10%. You can confirm on your end. You can confirm on your end. I'm getting a value of 10%. So we take our cost to be 10%. See? So once we have achieved this, our task now is easy. Now this is where the component of marginal will kick in very well. This is where the component of marginal will kick in very well. We have determined the marginal or additional cost that each source will give us. See? So I need to determine our weights. What will be the weight of these elements? The weight of this element, this one is based on what? 20. So I'll be having 8 of 20, 4 of 20, 5 of 20, and 3 of 20. See? To give us our component of what? The weights. Which we agree, 8 divided by 20 to give us 0.4, being our weight, 0.4. 4 divided by 20, 0.2. 5 divided by 20, 0.25. 3 divided by 20, 0.15. So that once we have that, we simply multiply by our component cost. For ordinary shares, 10.25. For retained earnings, 9.67. For debentures, 10.22. For preference shares, 10. So that in the long run, what will we be having as our weighted marginal cost of capital? 0.4 times 10.25, which will give us 4.1. 0.2 times 9.67, which I'm getting 1.934. 0.25 times 10.22, 2.555. 0.15 times 10, 1.5. So if I told you to sum it up, what will you be having? 4.1 plus 1.934 plus 2.555 plus 1.5, which is giving us the marginal weighted to be 10.09%. See, to determine our weighted marginal cost of capital, WMCC. So always whenever you are dealing with WMCC, always consider this fact that you're looking at additional. We're looking at additional. So my good students, we have these classes which are ongoing. You can get more of these videos app.mdarasa.com. Go to this website or this platform, create your account on the platform. Go and search if at all it is general financial management, or if at all you're doing CPA, just go and search CPA. Scroll to where you see or where we have the unit that you're doing. Follow the process and you will get all these videos. I know they have really helped you and they'll continue helping you. If at all you want to reach us out, our number is indicated there, 0708 068 851. You can reach us out and we'll always be here to guide you. So in our next segment, of course, you're going to do another question for WACC so that you get to know the difference between these two components. This was financial management, a paper that was tested in April 2025, a concept of Wmcc. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you guys in our classes. Given that revisions are almost commencing, be sure to book your space. Have a nice time, and bye-bye.